Subscribe before the ice cracks. Tell me where you are listening from, and what the weather is like outside your window. The first thing Avellini Frost heard after 10 years of feeding the ice dragon was her sister laughing in the sealed chamber that was supposed to open for no one. The second thing she heard was a man's voice, new and beautiful and full of frost-polished arrogance. "At last," he said. "You came back to me." Avellini stood in the corridor with a silver bowl in one hand and a bandage already wrapped around her palm. The bowl held moon water, powdered pearl, and 3 red drops she had not let the servants see. Every night for 10 years, she had crossed the private passage behind her wardrobe, unlocked the dragon vault, warmed the frozen egg with her blood, and told no one. Not her father's council. Not the court physicians. Not even Mira. Especially not Mira. Mira would have cried first. Then she would have shouted. Then she would have tried to feed the egg herself with one of her very pretty fingers, and Avellini would have had to sit on her. That had always been the shape of their sisterhood. Avellini hid knives. Mira kicked doors. Avellini counted money. Mira bought a purple hat and convinced 3 guards it was a diplomatic necessity. Avellini endured pain quietly. Mira noticed too late and then tried to declare war on furniture. Now Mira was inside the vault, wearing Avellini's old blue cloak. Avellini had seen it earlier on her shoulders and said nothing. Mira loved old clothes because she claimed they had story. She had come to visit for 3 days, opened Avellini's wardrobe, found the cloak, spun once, and announced that if sadness had to exist, at least it should have good lining. Then she had discovered the hidden latch. The latch had been covered by a row of winter gowns. Avellini should have locked it. She had been tired. The blood feeding had taken longer than usual. The dragon egg had trembled for the first time at dawn, the shell pulsing under her hand, and she had spent the entire morning pretending she was not afraid. Inside the chamber, ice light moved along the walls. Mira laughed again, but this time the sound had a nervous edge. "You are very tall for a secret pet." "I am not a pet," the man said. "That is exactly what a proud pet would say." Avellini closed her eyes. Her sister had found the hidden dragon, watched him turn from egg to man, and chosen flirtation as a survival strategy. That was unfortunately consistent. The silver bowl shook in Avellini's hand. She looked through the narrow crack of the door. The egg was split open in the center of the vault. Frost steamed from the shell. A man stood before it barefoot on the ice, tall and pale, with hair the color of winter sunlight and eyes like blue glass. Silver scales glimmered at his throat. He wore nothing but a half-formed robe of frost magic that clung to him like a crown deciding whether he deserved it. He held Mira's hand. Mira, bright as stolen candlelight, stared up at him with wide eyes and a smile that meant she had not yet understood the cost of what was happening. Avellini understood it at once. The blood in the bowl belonged to her. The scar on her palm belonged to her. The 10 winters of faintness, shivering, hidden fevers, and sleeve stains belonged to her. The man standing in the chamber had been alive because she had chosen not to let the egg die. And he was looking at Mira. "You wore the cloak," he said softly. Mira glanced down. "Yes. It is my sister's. I borrowed it without asking, which means I will apologize later with cake." His thumb moved over the old embroidery at the cuff. The embroidery was hers. Avellini had stitched it with numb fingers the year the egg nearly froze through. Her blood had stained one thread. That stain had never washed out. The dragon's eyes lowered to it. Something passed across his face. Recognition, maybe. Then he looked back at Mira and smiled. Avellini stepped away from the crack before her body betrayed her with a sound. There were moments when a person could stop a knife by shouting. This was not one of them. Mira had done nothing cruel. She had walked into a secret and been greeted by a beautiful man who looked at her like a legend waking. If Avellini burst in now with her bandaged hand and cold face, Mira would break herself with guilt. She would remember every time Avellini had turned pale at dinner. She would count every cloak sleeve folded over a hidden wound. She would hate herself for being present. Avellini could not bear that, so she did what she had always done. She set the bowl on a side table, folded both hands until the pain disappeared behind discipline, and walked away. Behind her, the dragon laughed at something Mira said. It was a low, pleased laugh. Avellini had never heard him laugh in 10 years. She had fed him through silence. She had spoken to a shell that never answered. She had told it court gossip, budget trouble, and one joke about a priest who slipped on frozen soup. Nothing had stirred. He laughed for Mira in less than 5 minutes. By the time Avellini reached her chamber, Her little rejected Drake was lying on her pillow pretending to be dead. He was the size of a hunting dog, if the hunting dog had been built from ice, spite, and bad decisions. His left wing bent at an awkward angle. One horn was chipped. The court hatchery had named him a failed frostling and sent him to Avellini because she had a soft hand for broken things. She had renamed him Cricket. He hated that. At the sound of her entering, Cricket opened one silver eye, saw her face, and immediately shut it again. "Do not play dead at me," Avellini said. Cricket went limp with great commitment. "I am not in the mood." His tail twitched. Avellini sat on the bed. For 1 full minute, she did nothing but breathe. Then Cricket lifted his head, crawled across the blanket, and pressed his cold nose against her bandaged palm. She looked down at him. "I know," she said. He made a small angry sound, half chirp and half kettle. "Yes, he is handsome." Cricket struck the pillow with his tail. "That does not make him guilty by itself." Another tail strike. "No, I am not defending him. I am defending my sister from facts she does not have." Cricket stared at her with the exhausted contempt of a creature forced to live among slow humans. Avellini touched the chipped horn. "If you bite him, choose a sleeve. We cannot afford another diplomatic repair." The Drake flopped over and resumed pretending to be dead. That evening, the whole ice court learned that Lord Selwyn had awakened. He emerged from the private vault dressed in white and silver, fully formed, fully beautiful, and fully aware of the effect he had on the room. Courtiers fell to their knees. Priests wept. The frost bells rang until one cracked. Avellini stood on the side of the hall with Cricket under her chair, and her hands folded inside her sleeves. Selwyn approached Mira first. He bowed over her hand. "My first sight after the dark," he said, "was you." Mira blushed with such dramatic brightness that 3 ladies sighed. Avellini kept her face still. Her sister looked across the hall at her, delighted and confused and seeking permission. Avellini gave a small nod. "It cost more than the blood had." Mira smiled back, relieved. Cricket bit the leg of Avellini's chair. "Stop that," she murmured. The chair creaked. Lord Selwyn looked at the sound. His gaze touched Avellini for the first time since his awakening. For one breath he paused. She watched him notice the bandage hidden under her cuff. She watched his eyes move to the old blood thread embroidery on Myra's borrowed cloak. She watched him understand enough to make a choice. Then he looked away. Avellini's hand closed under the table. The chair leg cracked in Cricket's mouth. A court lady screamed. Cricket dropped the wood and looked offended by the accusation of drama. Mira turned. "Avellini, your Drake is eating furniture again." "He is processing politics," Avellini said. "He processes politics through carpentry? He has range." A few people laughed. Avellini did not. Selwyn did. He laughed as if this were charming. As if Avellini had not spent 10 years lowering her body temperature 1 drop at a time to warm his shell. By midnight, the court was drunk on Miracle. Selwyn stood near the frost windows with young lords surrounding him and Mira at his side. She asked reckless questions. He answered only half of them and smiled whenever she teased him. Mira called him Lord Icicle to his face. He looked delighted. Avellini left before the second toast. No one stopped her. That was the first lesson of being useful. People noticed the work when it failed, not the worker when she left. The second lesson came behind the tapestry of the west corridor. Avellini was returning to the vault to lock the blood basin when she heard Selwyn's voice through the service arch. "Of course I know," he said. She stopped. Another man laughed. That was Arden, Selwyn's newly appointed captain, a blonde court jackal with enough perfume to stun bees. "You know?" Arden asked. "Then why let the little sunbeam think she woke you?" "Because she is the one worth looking at," Selwyn said. Avellini stood very still. Cricket, tucked against her shoulder under a dark shawl, lifted his head. Arden lowered his voice. "The elder sister fed you." "Yes." Selwyn sounded bored with the fact. The blood was hers. The cloak was hers. The chamber scent was hers. She has a quiet little talent for endurance. A valuable woman, then. A useful one. The word struck clean. Selwyn continued. Useful women are often convinced usefulness is love. Avellini is solemn, dutiful, and cold enough to put the egg back to sleep. Mira laughs. Mira looks at me as if I returned from legend for her alone. Arden chuckled. "So you will let the mistake stand?" "It is not a mistake if it improves the story." Avellini's palm burned inside its bandage. Cricket's claws dug into her sleeve. Will Avellini object? Arden asked. She will not make a scene. She is not made for scenes. She will fold her hands, keep the accounts, and bleed if the vault asks politely. The laugh that rose in Avellini's throat was soft. That was worse than a sob. She pushed the tapestry aside and walked into the archway. Both men turned. Arden's smile died first. Selwyn's remained alive out of habit, then began to look uncertain. Avellini stopped 3 steps away. She did not raise her voice. She did not shake. She did not cry, though something inside her had broken with a sound she would remember later. How efficient, she said. I was about to invoice you. Selwyn blinked. Avellini. No. Not that tone. That is the tone men use when they believe a woman has wandered into the wrong conversation. Arden took one careful step back. Cricket crawled from her shawl onto her shoulder and opened both eyes. Avellini held out her bandaged hand. 10 years of blood supply. 10 years of night watch. 10 years of ice basin maintenance. Emergency thawing during the 7th winter. Contractual silence for the safety of the court. Emotional labor for not frightening my sister. Furniture loss due to dragon-related stress. I will accept payment in coin, land rights, and a formal release from all future supply demands. Selwyn's beautiful mouth parted. For the first time since he had awakened, he looked young. You cannot be serious. I am very serious. That has been your complaint. Arden made the mistake of laughing. Cricket launched from Avellini's shoulder, hit Arden in the chest, and knocked him into a rack of ceremonial shields. He did not bite skin. He bit dignity. The captain went down in a storm of silver clanging. Avellini did not look away from Selwyn. Call him off, Selwyn snapped. He is processing finance. This is absurd. No. What is absurd is that you believed I would keep feeding a man who knowingly stole 10 years of my body and then complained that I did not sparkle enough while doing it. Selwyn's eyes flashed frost blue. A small wind moved along the corridor. Then he looked at her properly. That was almost funny. Her anger had made her visible. His gaze moved over her face, down to her narrow waist under the dark gown, then back to her eyes. Not with gratitude. Not with remorse. With surprise. With interest. Avellini smiled. It was not kind. There it is, she said. What? The first honest thing you have given me. Selwyn swallowed. How much? Arden, under 2 shields and 1 drake, made a small choking noise. Avellini reached into her sleeve and drew out a folded paper. She had written it years ago as a joke during one very bad winter, when the egg had demanded more blood than the physicians thought safe. She had calculated what the court would owe if anyone ever valued her work properly. She placed it in Selwyn's hand. He unfolded it. His face changed. This is a fortune. That is the discounted rate. For what? For not billing you interest and screams. Cricket sneezed on Arden's hair. Selwyn stared at her for another long moment. His pride fought his fear. Fear won because newly awakened dragons understand power, and Selwyn had begun to feel the first tremor of his core without her blood. He signed before dawn. Avellini left the corridor with 3 sealed drafts, 2 property transfers, and Cricket carrying Arden's glove like a trophy. Then she went to Mira. Her sister was sitting on the edge of Avellini's bed, still wearing the old blue cloak, with a pastry in one hand and a guilty expression that had arrived ahead of the facts. I think I did something wrong, Mira said. Avellini closed the door. Cricket dropped the glove and immediately pretended to be a decorative statue. Mira looked at the drake. He looked smug. He committed mild treason. Oh, did he win? For now. Mira stood. Avellini, what is happening? Selwyn said things tonight that felt lovely when he said them, and then I saw your face across the hall, and I kept thinking the cloak smelled like the vault. I found the door by accident. I swear I found it by accident. I know. You're using the soft voice. I hate the soft voice. It means the news has teeth. Avellini sat in the chair opposite her. For a moment, she could not begin. Mira crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and took both of Avellini's hands before Avellini could hide them. The bandage showed. Myra's expression emptied. No, she whispered. Avellini did not pull away. Mira unwrapped the bandage with shaking fingers. The cut was clean, shallow, and already silvering at the edges. 10 years of such marks had trained Avellini's skin into silence. Mira stared at it. Then she looked toward the wall behind the wardrobe. No, Mira. No. Do not use my name as a sedative. You bled for that egg? Yes. For how long? Avellini hesitated. Myra's eyes filled. Do not make me guess. 10 years. The pastry fell from Myra's hand. Cricket caught it in his mouth. Both sisters stared at him. He froze, pastry halfway swallowed. Myra pointed through tears. Not now. The drake swallowed very slowly. Avellini should not have laughed. She did. The sound cracked open, and once it did, the rest came with it. Myra surged up and wrapped her arms around her sister, so hard Avellini lost breath. I flirted with him, Myra said into her shoulder. You flirt with bakers when they give correct change. That is different. Bakers have cinnamon rolls. Myra. I hate him. You liked him an hour ago. I have developed. Avellini held her tighter. Myra pulled back, cheeks wet, eyes furious. Did he know? Avellini was quiet. Myra understood. The brightness in her face sharpened into something useful. Good, Myra said. Avellini narrowed her eyes. That tone frightens me. It should. I am going to be charming at him until his soul falls out. No, fine. Then I will be practical. We leave. Avellini blinked. Myra stood and began opening drawers. You have money? Yes. Of course you do. You are angry and organized. That is the most dangerous kind of wealthy. I have compensation. Better. Compensation has perfume. It does not. It should. Avellini watched her sister throw stockings, jewels, and one entirely unnecessary feathered fan into a trunk. Myra, you do not have to leave because of me. Myra stopped. Her face turned open and hurt. Do you truly think there is a version of this where I stay with a man who used your blood and smiled at me with it on his teeth? The room went still. Avellini looked down. Myra crossed back to her and touched her face with both hands. You are my first home. Do not insult me by making that sound optional. Cricket made a soft noise. Myra looked at him. You too, furniture criminal. The drake lifted his chin. By sunrise, the Frost sisters left the ice court with 2 trunks, 3 sealed drafts, 1 property deed, 1 failed drake, and Myra's new theory that betrayal should always be taxed heavily. The court did not stop them because Selwyn told everyone Avellini had taken a rest for her nerves. That lie lasted 6 hours. It died when the main ice fountain in the court hall thawed, sagged, and dropped a stone fish onto a duke's foot. Without Avellini's blood, Selwyn's power began to flicker. Without Avellini's hands, the vault temperature rose. Without Avellini's quiet accounting, 3 priests discovered that they had been blessing the wrong basin for 4 years. By evening, the ice court understood that the serious woman had not been decorative. By then, she was already on the northern road. Snow started after the 3rd mile. Avellini rode in the first carriage with Myra, while Cricket occupied an entire opposite seat despite being smaller than a laundry basket. Every time Myra tried to share the blanket, he sighed like a wronged king. You are very dramatic for a defective dragon, Myra told him. Cricket opened one eye. I said what I said. He rolled onto his back and let his tongue hang out. Myra gasped. Avellini, he died. He does that when criticized. Should we apologize? No, Cricket remained dead. Myra leaned closer. He is committed. Unfortunately. The carriage hit a rut. Cricket slid off the seat, landed on his back, and continued playing dead on the floor. Myra whispered, I respect the art. Avellini laughed before she could stop herself. The sound felt strange, too light for the body carrying it. Her hands trembled afterward, and she tucked them under her cloak. Myra saw. She always saw too late, but when she saw, she did not look away. You are colder, Myra said. I am recovering. That is not an answer. It is the answer available. Cricket stopped playing dead. He crawled across the floor, climbed onto Avellini's boots, and pressed his body over them like an offended heating stone. Myra's mouth softened. He loves you. He loves warm socks. The drake glared. Avellini looked out at the snow. The road north curved through black pines. She had chosen it because Selwyn's compensation included an abandoned frost house near the border, once used by old dragon wardens. It had walls, a roof, a frozen well, and no court portraits of men who believed women came in useful and entertaining varieties. They reached it near dusk. The house sat under a ridge of blue ice, square and ugly and honest. Smoke rose from one chimney. Avellini drew a knife from her boot. Myra blinked. When did you get that? When I became serious and dull. That was unfair. I never called you dull. No, he did. Then I hope the knife is for his furniture. The front door opened before the carriage stopped. A man stood in the doorway. He was very tall. Not elegant tall like Selwyn, who looked arranged by mirrors. This man was built with the blunt confidence of mountains. His shoulders filled the frame. Dark hair fell loose around a face that looked direct rather than pretty. His eyes were pale silver, and they fixed on Avellini with such immediate focus that she forgot to step down. Cricket launched from the carriage, ran past him, and bit his boot. The man looked down. The Drake looked up. For one full second, both held very still. Then the man said, "Traitor." Cricket chirped. Avellini gripped the carriage door. "You know him?" The man looked back at her. His stare returned with alarming force. "I know many unfortunate creatures." Mira leaned out beside Avellini. "That is not an answer, but your face is very answer-like." The man blinked once. Mira smiled. Avellini sighed. "Mira." "What?" "He is huge." It seemed relevant. The man's ears turned faintly pink. Avellini noticed. He noticed her noticing. His gaze moved immediately to the ridge behind the house. "I am Tavik Arvin," he said to the ridge. "This house was abandoned, but not unguarded." "You are speaking to a cliff," Mira said. "I am aware." "Good. I worried northern manners were different." Avellini stepped down. Her knees nearly failed. Tavik moved so fast she barely saw him cross the space. He stopped before touching her, one hand hovering near her elbow. The restraint was sharp enough to count. "You are unwell," he said. "I am recently compensated. That is not a medical condition. It has improved my mood." His eyes dropped to her bandaged palm. Avellini closed her fingers. Cricket bit Tavik's boot again. Tavik did not look down this time. "He says you saved him." "He says things." Avellini asked. "When he is not pretending to be a corpse." Mira clasped her hands. Finally, someone appreciates the performance. Tavik's gaze did not leave Avellini. "Your Drake should not have survived. His core was sealed. I fed him broth. That is not enough. I also insulted him. That may have helped." Cricket made an approving sound. Avellini should have asked why Tavik knew so much. She should have asked why a guarded abandoned house had a man inside it. Instead she found herself trapped by the plain intensity in his eyes. Selwyn had looked at her as if she had become interesting after anger. Tavik looked at her as if she had been important before she entered the yard. It was rude. Her face warmed. He saw that too and looked away first. "I will light the second hearth," he said. "The house has two?" Mira asked. "Three. Excellent. We have upgraded from betrayal to architecture." Avellini followed him inside. The frost house smelled of cedar, cold stone, and fresh bread. Someone had prepared it. Blankets lay folded by the hearth. A kettle steamed. 3 rooms had been swept. The pantry held enough food for a week. Avellini stopped in the hall. "You expected us." Tavik set another log on the fire. "I expected Selwyn to fail someone. I did not know who would have enough sense to leave." Mira pointed at him. That sounded wise and insulting. It was both. Efficient. Avellini looked at Tavik. "What are you?" He met her gaze directly. A beat passed. Cricket sneezed. Tavik looked away. "A caretaker of old roads." That is the sort of answer people give when the truth has wings. His mouth almost moved. Mira whispered, "Avellini, I think he has wings." "I heard you," Tavik said. "I intended that." Avellini sat before she fell. Tavik crossed to the hearth, took a blanket, and draped it around her shoulders. His fingers did not touch her neck. They came close enough for the heat of him to reach through the cold. Avellini stared at the fire. "You move like a soldier," she said. "I was one. You stock houses like a steward. I have had to be several things. You stare like a dog who has chosen a door and intends to guard it forever." Mira made a delighted noise. Tavik went still. Avellini looked up, realizing what she had said. His eyes were on her again, direct and impossible. Then he turned his face toward the window. "I do not stare. You were staring just now." "I was checking for fever." "With your eyes?" "Yes." Mira collapsed into a chair. "I like him." Cricket climbed onto Tavik's boot and sat there with possessive approval. That night, Avellini slept for 4 hours without waking to feed an egg. In the morning, she found Tavik in the yard splitting wood shirtless in the snow. She closed the door immediately. Mira, behind her with a cup of tea, hit the door with her forehead. "Open it again," Mira said. "No, for ventilation." "No, for national morale. Avalini walked away. Her face was hot for reasons unrelated to fever. Tavik entered 10 minutes later wearing a dark shirt, as if he had lost an argument with the weather. His hair was damp. Cricket followed him, carrying one glove. The Drake dropped it at Avalini's feet. "That is not mine," Avalini said. Cricket pushed it closer. Tavik looked at the glove. "He stole that from me." "I gathered. He thinks gifts should be taken first and explained later. He has court training." Tavik's mouth curved. The smile was brief, but it changed the room. It made him look younger and more dangerous because it suggested there was warmth under all that silence, and it had chosen the worst possible moment to appear. Avalini looked down at the glove. Mira watched them over her cup with the expression of a woman enjoying free theater. The first week at the Frost House became stranger than Avalini expected. Mira reorganized the pantry by emotional importance. Bread came first. Jam second. Documents third because, in her words, paper cannot be eaten unless the situation is extremely political. Cricket discovered that if he played dead near the kitchen door, the cook Tavik had hired would panic and drop cheese. The cook, Mrs. Brindle, was a square woman with arms like rolling pins and a voice that could discipline soup. On the third day, she stood over Cricket with a ladle. "That animal is not dead," she said. Cricket lay motionless. He blinked. "He did not," Mira said loyally. "He blinked at my cheese." Tavik entered, looked at the Drake, and said, "Rise." Cricket remained dead. Tavik crouched. "Avalini is looking." Cricket sprang upright so fast he skidded into a bucket. Everyone turned to Avalini. She was holding a stack of medical notes. "What?" "Nothing," Tavik said. Mrs. Brindle snorted. "Nothing, my left elbow." Avalini pretended to read. The notes were upside down. Tavik noticed. Of course he noticed. He looked away with such violent discipline that Mira had to cough into her napkin. This was the problem with Tavik Arvin. He was not smooth. He did not flatter. He did not say elaborate things. He simply appeared where he was needed, carried heavy objects, fixed broken latches, placed warm tea at Avalini's elbow, and looked at her as if each small act was not enough. He was difficult to defend against. Selwyn sent the first letter on the 8th day. It arrived with a courier in silver livery and 12 lines of wounded pride. He wrote that Avalini had misunderstood court pressures. He wrote that Mira had been innocent, which was true and therefore insulting when used by him. He wrote that a dragon's awakening was confusing. Avalini read it at breakfast. Mira leaned over. "Does he apologize?" "No." "Does he offer more money?" "No." "Then why did the tree die for this?" Cricket set the edge of the letter on fire with a tiny blue puff. Avalini looked at him. He looked back, smoke curling from one nostril. "That was evidence." He coughed. Tavik calmly covered the flame with an empty plate. "It is still mostly evidence." Mira lifted the blackened corner. "Now it is evidence with opinion." A second letter came 2 days later. This one had fewer court phrases and more desperation. Selwyn's hands had begun to shake. The vault frost would not answer him. The priests whispered. His skin had lost its scale sheen. He requested a meeting. Avalini folded the letter. "No," she said. Tavik, across the table, went very still. Mira nodded. "Elegant. Direct. My favorite complete sentence." Avalini sent back one line. "All supply relationships were settled by your signature." Cricket added a claw print. Tavik added nothing. He merely sent 2 riders to escort the courier off the road. Avalini did not ask why he had riders. She should have. On the 12th day she learned. Selwyn did not come alone. He arrived at the Frost House with Arden, 6 court guards, and a priest carrying a portable blood basin wrapped in silk. Selwyn looked diminished, though he was still beautiful enough to make his own decay dramatic. His hair had lost its silver brightness. Fine cracks of frost crossed his wrists. Mira saw him from the upper window and shouted, "Absolutely not!" Mrs. Brindle grabbed a frying pan. Cricket played dead in the hallway, then reconsidered and dragged himself dramatically toward the door. Tavik stood beside Avalini at the threshold. Selwyn's eyes flicked to him. Something like recognition moved across his face, followed by fear he buried too late. "You," Selwyn said. Tavik did not answer. Avalini looked between them. "You two know each other." Selwyn laughed weakly. "Everyone knows old northern ghosts." Tavik's gaze stayed on him. "You should have stayed at court. You do not command me." "No. Your corps does." Selwyn's jaw tightened. Avellini stepped forward. State your business. Selwyn looked relieved to turn back to her. We need to correct a ritual imbalance. No, you have not heard the terms. I recognize the basin. Arden lifted his chin. Lady Frost, the court requires a temporary donation. Cricket, still halfway between dead and alive, opened one eye. Mira came down the stairs wearing a red cloak and murder in her smile. Say that again. I want to hear how ugly you can make a sentence. Selwyn looked at her, and for a moment grief crossed his face. Not for what he had done, for what he had lost. Mira, I never meant to hurt you. Mira stopped on the last step. That is probably true. I was the version of this you liked. The words landed clean. Avellini loved her so much it hurt. Selwyn turned back to Avellini. I paid you. For past labor. I need future supply. Then you should have remained worth supplying. Arden stepped forward. Tavik moved one hand. Not a threat. Not even a full gesture. Every court guard stopped. Avellini noticed. Selwyn noticed too. You cannot hide behind him forever, Selwyn said. Avellini smiled. I am in front of him. Tavik's eyes moved to her profile. Heat seemed to gather at her shoulder, though he had not touched her. Selwyn saw that and made the mistake of jealousy. You barely know what he is. No, Avellini said. But he has never asked me to bleed before breakfast. Mrs. Brindle shouted from inside. Low bar, and yet some men crawl under it. Mira applauded. Cricket sneezed blue sparks onto the path. The priest clutched his basin. Selwyn's composure cracked. Avellini, enough. You think this is revenge, but you do not understand dragon law. Your blood shaped my core. That gives me claim to you. Tavik's stillness changed. Avellini felt it like weather pressure. She raised one hand without looking back. Mine. He stopped. She had not known he would obey. He did. Completely. Selwyn looked between them, and something ugly twisted his face. Avellini stepped closer. You're correct about one part. My blood shaped your core. Selwyn faltered. That means it is traceable, she continued. It means every court priest can prove how much of your revived power came from me. It means your signature on my settlement acknowledged prior supply. And it means if you pursue a new claim, I can request a public core audit. The priest went pale. Arden muttered, my lord. Selwyn's eyes sharpened with fear. You would not. I am serious, remember? Cricket rose from his fake death and came to stand at her side. Tavik looked down at the drake. Their eyes met again. That silent exchange was too old, too full of meaning. Avellini filed it away. Selwyn left that day without blood. He came back in worse ways. Over the next month, he sent apologies, accusations, gifts, threats disguised as poetry, and once a crystal swan that sang Myra's name until Mrs. Brindle shut it in the bread oven. He appeared at the winter market looking tragic and caused 3 matrons to sigh before Mira walked past him carrying turnips and said, Your sorrow clashes with your coat. He tried to speak to Avellini outside the apothecary. Tavik stepped from an alley before Selwyn reached her. Avellini looked at him. Were you following me? I was walking efficiently in the same direction. For 5 streets. The road was persuasive. Selwyn stared at him with open dislike. Do you guard her like a hound? Tavik did not take offense. He looked at Avellini as if waiting for her definition of the insult. That was Tavik's strangeness. He let her decide the shape of things. Avellini looked at Selwyn. A good hound knows loyalty. Do not insult hounds. Tavik's ears turned faintly red again. Selwyn saw. His mouth tightened. After that, Tavik offered faster travel by dragon. Avellini said no at first. Then the Western Archive sent word that old dragon law records would be sealed by dawn, and the mountain road was blocked by snow. Tavik stood in the yard, looking at the ridge with unnatural calm. I can take you. How? Avellini asked. He glanced at Cricket. Cricket looked smug. Mira leaned out the window. If he turns into a giant bird, I am coming. He is not turning into a bird, Avellini said. Tavik removed his coat and folded it over the fence. Avellini stared. Mira, she said carefully, go inside. Why? Because I have begun to suspect weather is about to become indecent. Tavik coughed once. Then he changed. The yard filled with blue-white light. Snow lifted in a circle. Where the man had stood, a massive ice dragon lowered his head, scales dark at the spine and pale along the wings, eyes the same direct silver. He was enormous, beautiful, and so silent that the mountain seemed to hold breath. Avalini forgot every question she had. Mira whispered from the window, "Not a bird." Cricket sat in the snow and looked unbearably proud, as if he had arranged the entire species. Tavik lowered one wing like a stare. Avalini approached slowly. "You could have mentioned this earlier." The dragon huffed. "You did mention wings badly by not mentioning them." Another huff. She climbed onto his back. His scales were cold, but not cruel. A ridge behind his neck fit her knees. She settled there as she would settle on a saddle, practical and focused. Tavik went very still. Avalini patted his neck. "This will save time." His wings twitched. Below, Mira made a strangled sound. "What?" Avalini called. "Nothing," Mira called back, voice shaking. "Transportation." The dragon's neck warmed under Avalini's gloved hand. She frowned. "Are you feverish?" Tavik launched into the sky. The world fell away in blue wind. Avalini gripped the ridge. The first rush tore a laugh out of her. Not a polite laugh. Not a broken laugh. A living one. Frost streamed past. The mountains opened below. Tavik flew steady under her, every movement controlled, every tilt adjusted before she could lose balance. She leaned forward to speak near his ear slit. "You are very smooth for a road." His wings faltered. The dip lasted half a second. Avalini tightened her knees. Tavik recovered so sharply that the clouds split around them. "You are also easily distracted," she said. The dragon made a low sound. She interpreted it as disagreement. A hard wind struck from the north ridge. Tavik banked once, then folded one wing and dropped through a curtain of white cloud. Avalini tightened both arms around the ridge at his neck. The motion brought her chest against cold scales and living power. He steadied so quickly that she understood he had felt the shift before she had. They landed under a stone overhang halfway down the mountain. The space was small, dry, and cut into the rock by old wardens. Tavik shifted back in a sweep of frostlight. His coat formed around him, but his hair was loose from the wind, and snow clung to his jaw. Avalini slid down from the last curve of dragon scale. Her boots touched stone. Her knees did not quite agree. Tavik caught her by the waist. He did not pull her closer. He only held her steady. That was somehow worse. Avalini looked at his hands. They were large against the sides of her cloak. Careful. Completely still. "You said this saved time," she said. "It does." We stopped inside a mountain. The mountain interrupted. Convenient mountain. His mouth almost moved. A gust of snow swept across the opening. Tavik turned without thinking and put himself between the wind and her. One arm remained at her waist. The other braced against the rock above her shoulder. Avalini found herself under the shelter of him, with stone at her back and his body blocking the storm. He looked down. She looked up. For 3 breaths, there was no court, no hearing, no old dragon shouting behind them. Only cold air, his hand at her waist, and the terrible honesty of the way he looked at her. "You stare," she said. "Yes." That was not a denial. "I tried denial. It failed." Heat rose under her collar. "You are very direct for a man who keeps pretending to be a road." "I am not pretending to be a road. You keep offering transportation." His thumb shifted once at her waist, then stopped as if he had caught himself wanting too much. "Transportation is safer to offer," he said. Avalini's breath changed. That answer was not polite. It was not smooth. It was better. It admitted wanting without turning it into a demand. She lifted one gloved hand and pushed a strand of snow-damp hair from his forehead. He went still in a way no dragon should have been able to go still. "You are warm," she said. "I am trying not to be." "That sounds difficult." "With you, yes." The storm struck the stone again. Avalini smiled before she could protect herself. Then continued trying. "We have records to steal from history." "Borrow," he said. "Legally recover." His eyes stayed on her mouth for one heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he stepped back first. The distance felt like a promise, not a rejection. By the time they reached the Western Archive, the snow had frozen in Avalini's hair, and Tavik refused to meet her eyes after shifting back. He stood with his coat half-fastened, looking at a wall with severe attention. Avalini brushed ice from her sleeve. "Thank you. It saved time." "Yes. That was the reason." I agreed. "Good. Are you arguing with yourself?" No, his ears were pink. Avalini stepped closer before she could think better of it. Tavik looked down at her at once, direct as a blade and twice as inconvenient. "You are doing it again," she said. "Checking for frostbite. With your eyes." Yes. She should have stepped back. Instead she lifted one hand and brushed snow from his collar. His breath stopped. Avellini felt it. The pause moved through him like a held command. You carried me safely, she said. His voice lowered. Always. That word was dangerous. It had no ornament, no poetry, no excuse. She looked at his mouth. He looked at hers. A door banged open behind them. An elderly archivist shouted, If you two are finished steaming in my courtyard, the law records are freezing. Avellini stepped back. Tavik turned to the archive door with the expression of a man who had discovered a new enemy. The archivist adjusted his spectacles. Do not glare at me, dragon. I have survived 3 kings and a roof leak. That was how they met Master Oren Quill, who was 90 if pride counted as years and whose assistant, Juniper Quill, was half his size and twice his threat. Juniper looked at Avellini's documents, then at Tavik, then at the little claw mark Cricket had added to Selwyn's settlement. This is messy, she said. Avellini nodded. Juniper smiled. Good. Clean crimes are harder to bill. Avellini liked her immediately. The archive records confirmed what Selwyn had feared. Under old Ice Dragon law, a revived dragon core formed from another person's blood remained subject to a reclamation clause if the dragon knowingly misattributed the life source for status, courtship, or inheritance gain. It was an ancient rule, written after a prince once let 3 widows feed the same dragon and then married a harpist. Mira, reading the margin note later, said, History is mostly men causing paperwork. The clause did not mean Avellini could harm Selwyn. It meant she could reclaim what was hers through a public core audit. The court would measure the source of his awakened power. Any portion formed from her blood could be withdrawn and returned to her body. If the dragon could not sustain form afterward, he would return to his last stable state. An egg. Avellini stared at the record. Tavik stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. You do not have to decide today, he said. She looked at him. I want my health back. Then take it. No lecture on mercy? He knew. The simplicity of that answer steadied her. He will be helpless afterward, she said. He made helplessness your routine for 10 years. Avellini closed the book. Before the hearing could be announced, Avellini had to make the court understand one thing. This was not a romance quarrel. Men like Selwyn survived by shrinking women's anger into private emotion. If she shouted, he would call her wounded. If she wept, he would call her unstable. If Mira slapped him, he would call the Frost sisters hysterical and offer to forgive them in public. So Avellini built a case that could not be comforted away. She began with people, not papers. The first person she hired was Nell Breyer, a young vault clerk who had spent 3 years correcting priestly arithmetic and receiving credit for none of it. Nell had a plain brown braid, ink on both thumbs, and the unsettling habit of answering noblemen with exact page numbers. Avellini found her in the outer records room, where a senior priest was explaining that ladies should not trouble themselves with supply chains. Nell looked at the priest, then at the ledgers, then at Avellini. Do you want politeness, Nell asked, or accuracy? Avellini said, accuracy. Nell shut the priest's book with one hand. Then this man has been misfiling pearl powder purchases under ceremonial incense for 6 years. The priest made a wounded sound. Mira, who had insisted on attending the hiring interviews in a hat with unnecessary feathers, leaned toward Avellini. I want her. She is not a chair, Avellini said. No, she is sharper. Nell became assistant auditor before lunch. The second person Avellini brought in was Lady Etta Vane, an elderly court widow with a cane, a fox fur collar, and the kind of smile that had caused 3 ministers to retire early. Etta had known Avellini's mother. She had also known Selwyn's father, and she spoke of both men and dragons as if they were kitchen appliances that required periodic kicking. She arrived at the Frost house in a sleigh drawn by 2 black ponies and stepped down before anyone helped her. I heard there is to be a public embarrassment, Lady Etta said. Avellini bowed. A hearing. Child, at my age, legal language is only furniture. Mira clasped her hands. I adore her. You should, Etta said. I was adored before your mother learned buttons. Cricket came out from under the sleigh, carrying one of the pony bells in his mouth. Etta looked down at him. That one is either royalty or a criminal. Both, depending on the hour, Avellini said. Tavik appeared behind her and took the bell from Cricket without effort. The drake complained like a kettle full of scandal. Lady Etta studied Tavik from boots to shoulders to eyes. Northern. Tavik inclined his head. Dangerous. Another nod. Besotted. Tavik looked at a tree. Mira made a tiny triumphant noise. Avalini said, Lady Edda. I am old, not blind. Tavik remained intensely interested in the tree. Avalini's cheeks warmed. We need witnesses who will not be frightened by Selwyn's rank. Then stop asking people who want invitations to his parties, Edda said. Ask servants, vault workers, basin washers, physician apprentices, and anyone who was paid late. They remember everything because no one bribes them properly. That became the witness plan. For 5 days, the Frost House turned into a small government. Nell built a wall of records in the dining room. Mira invited half the lower staff for tea and accidentally extracted better testimony than 2 barristers could have managed. Lady Edda sat by the fire and identified which noble witnesses were cowards, which were liars, and which were both but could be used if placed near a window. By the second day, Nell had created a compensation board titled, in very neat ink, Things Lady Avalini should have been paid for. She added categories for blood supply, emergency vault labor, night watch, dragon emotional management, sister protection, and furniture eaten under political pressure. Mira stood before the board with a pastry in one hand. You forgot the fee for listening to handsome nonsense. Nell added it without blinking. Mrs. Brindle peered over her spectacles. Charge double if the nonsense wore white. Lady Edda tapped the floor with her cane. Triple if it bowed. Avalini looked at the board for a long moment. Then she said, add interest. Every woman in the room straightened as if the court had finally discovered religion. Tavik, carrying 2 evidence chests through the doorway, stopped beside the board. His eyes moved down the list. You underpriced the night watch. Nell looked offended. By how much? At least half. Mira pointed at him. Keep him. Avalini did not look at Tavik. That was because she was trying not to smile. Mrs. Brindle fed everyone as if hunger itself were a defendant. Tavik said little. He repaired the east gate, doubled the night watch, carried boxes without being asked, and appeared behind Avalini whenever a visitor's tone became too smooth. Avalini began to recognize his pattern. He did not interrupt her. He did not speak over her. He simply moved close enough that foolish people remembered the existence of bones. One afternoon, a merchant from the old ice court arrived to discuss settlement privacy. He smiled at Avalini as if she were a discount. My lady, surely a woman of your intelligence understands that public hearings are expensive for everyone. Avalini looked at Nell. Nell opened a ledger. Mira poured tea. Lady Edda smiled. Tavik stepped behind Avalini's chair. The merchant stopped smiling. Avalini folded her hands. Continue. I have forgotten my argument, he said. Mrs. Brindle handed him a biscuit. Happens around tall men with murder shoulders. Tavik coughed. Avalini looked down at her papers because laughter was not always professional. The merchant left with no agreement, 1 biscuit, and a new understanding of furniture placement. That night, Avalini found Tavik in the map room, looking over the route between the Frost House and the court. You frightened him, she said. I stood. You stood with intention. Yes. She leaned against the table. Do you always answer as if each word is rationed? No, Avalini waited. Tavik looked up. His eyes found hers with such force that her teasing disappeared. With you, he said, I answer carefully because I want every word to arrive clean. The room changed. Avalini could hear the hearth. She could hear Mira laughing somewhere beyond the hall. She could hear Cricket scratching at a locked cupboard, probably committing a pantry crime. Tavik's hands rested on the map table, large and still. Avalini moved closer before her caution could overrule her. You make ordinary statements sound dangerous. I am trying to make them safe. That may be the danger. His eyes lowered to her mouth. This time she did not pretend not to notice. The silence stretched. It was not empty. It had heat in it, and restraint, and the strange sharp comfort of standing near someone who could take a room apart, but chose to wait for her breath. A thump came from the cupboard. Neither moved. A second thump followed, then Cricket's muffled chirp of outrage. Avalini whispered. He locked himself in. Tavik did not look away. He has done worse. We should rescue him. In a moment. That was new. Avalini's pulse moved in her throat. Tavik lifted one hand slowly. She had enough time to move, object, laugh, or call him ridiculous. She did none of those things. His fingers touched the edge of her sleeve, where the old bandage had once been. He did not touch skin. The touch was barely anything. It still made her breath catch. You are warmer, he said. You are checking through fabric now. Yes. Advanced medicine. I have trained. She smiled. His gaze caught on the smile and stayed. The cupboard door burst open. Cricket rolled out inside a sack of dried apples, hit a chair leg, and lay motionless with great dignity. Avalini closed her eyes. Tavik looked at the ceiling. From the doorway, Mira said, I waited 3 whole minutes before opening that door. I deserve legal credit. You were listening? Avalini asked, only to make sure no one needed tea. Lady Edda's voice came from behind her. Coward. I was listening for scandal. Tavik turned away so quickly that one map slid off the table. Avalini laughed until she had to sit down. That laughter mattered. It entered the case in no ledger, but it changed the shape of the week. Avalini was not only preparing to punish Selwyn. She was building a room in which her body remembered it could be amused. Selwyn tried one more private tactic before the hearing. He came at dusk, alone this time, without guards or basin. He waited at the outer gate in a dark blue cloak, looking almost like the dream a younger Avalini might have invented when she was cold and tired and stupid with hope. She met him with Mira on her left and Tavik at a measured distance behind. Selwyn looked thinner. His eyes had lost their shine. That should have satisfied something in her. It did, but not as much as she expected. Avalini, he said. I was cruel. Mira whispered, mark the sky. A sentence hatched. Avalini lifted one hand. Mira quieted. Selwyn swallowed. I did know. Not at first, not in the first breath, but soon enough. The blood in my core pulled toward you every time you entered a room. Avalini said nothing. I looked at you and felt debt, he said. I looked at Mira and felt chosen. Myra's face hardened. Selwyn looked at her. That was not your fault. I know, Mira said. I am furious, not confused. He flinched. Then his eyes returned to Avalini. I thought I could make the better story true. The prettier story, Avalini said. Yes. There it was. Not a spell. Not a misunderstanding. Not a noble sacrifice. A vain man had preferred a woman who made him feel adored over the woman who had kept him alive. The clear ugliness steadied her. I accept that confession as testimony, she said. Selwyn stared. That is all. What else should there be? I am apologizing. No. You are describing yourself accurately for the first time. Tavik made a sound so quiet it might have been approval. Selwyn heard it. His pride rose, wounded and automatic. And him? You believe he wants nothing from you. Avalini turned slightly. Tavik stood in the falling snow, silent, huge, and painfully visible in his effort not to interfere. He wants many things, she said. Tavik's eyes snapped to her. Avalini felt warmth move up her neck and continued anyway. He wants to guard doors. He wants to carry boxes no one asked him to carry. He wants to stare at me until I ask whether he is checking for fever. He wants to turn into a dragon and call it efficient travel. Mira pressed both hands over her mouth. Tavik looked as if the snow had betrayed him. Avalini faced Selwyn again. But he is not once mistaken wanting for entitlement. Selwyn had no answer for that. When he left, he looked smaller than an egg already. Tavik remained by the gate after Mira went inside. Avalini stood beside him. Snow caught in his hair. You said many things, he murmured. I did. About what I want. Was I wrong? His eyes lowered to hers. No, the answer held too much. Avalini drew a breath, then stepped close enough that the edge of her cloak brushed his coat. Good. He did not touch her. She was starting to understand how much it cost him not to. So she touched him first. 2 fingers against his wrist. Light, deliberate, unmistakable. Tavik turned his hand and caught hers. The movement was gentle. The effect was not. Avalini looked down at their joined hands and thought of 10 years spent giving pieces of herself into cold silence. This felt nothing like that. This warmth came back. Inside the house, Cricket slammed into a window, slid down the glass, and dropped out of sight. Tavik closed his eyes. Avalini laughed. Residual shedding? Regrettably. Can you control him? Sometimes. Does he represent your dignity? Not successfully. She squeezed his hand once and let go before either of them forgot the open yard. The hearing notice went out the next morning. The public hearing was set for the first frost moon. Selwyn tried to stop it 3 times. First with a petition, then with a charm offensive, then with Arden's attempt to bribe Juniper Quill. Juniper accepted the purse, counted it in front of Arden, wrote a receipt, and listed it as Exhibit 12. Arden complained. She added his complaint as Exhibit 13. When the hearing opened, the ice court was packed. The old hall glittered with frost banners and candlelight. Nobles filled the galleries. Priests stood near the core basin. Lord Selwyn entered in white robes, pale and shaking but still trying to look wronged beautifully. Arden walked behind him with the expression of a man who had learned to fear stationery. Mira sat beside Avellini, dressed in black velvet and no borrowed cloak. Cricket lay across her lap, pretending to sleep. Every few minutes, he opened one eye at Selwyn. Tavik stood behind Avellini's chair. Not in front. Behind, like a wall she had chosen. Mira leaned close. He is staring again. I know. Are we ignoring it? We are conducting a hearing. I can multitask. Avellini kept her face forward, but her mouth almost betrayed her. Master Oren Quill presided, because he was old enough to have offended every family equally. Juniper managed the exhibits. Mrs. Brindle had somehow obtained a front seat and a meat pie. Oren struck the staff once. Lady Avellini Frost petitions for core audit and supply reclamation against Lord Selwyn Vale, awakened ice dragon of the southern vault. Claim basis, 10 years blood supply, knowing misattribution, status gain, and attempted renewed claim after settlement. Selwyn rose. This is an attack by a bitter woman. Mira also rose. Avellini touched her sleeve. Mira sat, but not happily. Avellini stood. No, she said. This is an invoice with witnesses. A ripple moved through the hall. Selwyn's face tightened. Avellini laid her bandaged hand on the edge of the basin. The water inside was clear and still. Priests lit 3 blue flames. Juniper read the supply records aloud. Date by date. Winter by winter. Not tiny evidence. Not a lost ring or a secret note. The entire system spoke. Vault temperature logs. Physician reports with missing reasons filled in. Ice basin maintenance. Security entries showing Avellini entering every night. Servant witness statements. Payment papers Selwyn had signed. Court expense ledgers listing pearl powder, silver thread, and moon water. The old blue cloak appeared only as part of the chain, not the heart of it. Then the basin changed. The water rose into images. Avellini at 20, pale and stubborn, touching the egg for the first time. Avellini at 23, leaning against the wall after the 7th winter emergency, refusing help until the shell stabilized. Avellini at 26, hiding her bandage before Mira entered for tea. Mira began to cry without sound. Selwyn looked away. Oren barked, "Look at the evidence, boy." You enjoyed the result. Avellini did not look at Tavik. She felt him behind her anyway, still as a storm held back by choice. The basin showed Selwyn in the corridor with Arden. His own voice filled the hall. The blood was hers. The cloak was hers. She has a quiet little talent for endurance. The hall froze. Then came the rest. Useful women are often convinced usefulness is love. Mira stood so fast Cricket rolled off her lap and landed upright by pure indignation. You fungus-hearted chandelier, she said. Oren sighed. Lady Mira, insults will be entered only if relevant. It is relevant to his general shape. Noted. Juniper wrote something down. Selwyn's hands shook. I was confused. Newly awakened dragons have unstable perception. Avellini turned to him. Then why did you sign a settlement? He opened his mouth. No answer arrived. Why did you request future supply? She asked. His jaw worked. Why did you bring a basin to my home? The priest who had carried it stared at the floor. Selwyn's beauty could not help him now. Not because beauty had vanished, but because the room had learned how expensive it was. Oren looked to the priests. Proceed with core audit. Selwyn stepped back. No, the basin flared. Tavik moved one step. Selwyn stopped. Avellini lifted her hand before Tavik could do more. I will do it, she said. The old law required the claimant to touch the basin and speak the withdrawal plainly. No rage spell. No blade. No gore. A public reversal, clean and terrible. Avellini placed her palm flat on the water. I reclaim the blood that woke you, she said. I reclaim the strength I gave without truth. I reclaim the winters you counted as silence. I leave you whatever was truly yours. The basin light rose. Selwyn cried out. Not in injury. In loss. Silver blue power streamed from his chest into the water, thinned, changed, and moved into Avellini's hand. Warmth struck her blood, so hard she gasped. Color returned to her fingers. The ache that had lived behind her ribs for years loosened. Her body remembered itself. Tavik's hand hovered near her shoulder. She did not need it. She loved that it was there. Selwyn collapsed to his knees. Frost cracked over his skin. His arms folded inward. The court shouted. The shape of him folded smaller, brighter, until robes fell empty around a silver egg no larger than a cradle. The egg rocked once. Then Selwyn's voice echoed from inside, thin and furious. This is undignified. The hall stared. Mira covered her mouth. Cricket sat down very slowly, as if witnessing art. The egg rocked again. Idaman propecutions. Selwyn shouted. Mrs. Brindle leaned toward Juniper. Can eggs demand things? Juniper opened a law book. Not effectively. Avalini sat down because her knees had started to tremble from returning strength. Tavik's hand closed around the back of her chair, not touching her, supporting the space around her. Orin struck the staff. Judgment. Lord Selwyn Vale is restored to pre-awakening state. Without voluntary blood supply from Lady Avalini Frost or Lady Mira Frost, projected reawakening is 100 years under standard vault conditions. The egg screamed. 100. Orin looked over his spectacles. With good behavior. The egg went silent. Avalini stood again. There will be conditions. Orin nodded. State them. Selwyn will be housed in the lower Frost nursery. Only Marlowe Vale, former steward to his father, may serve as his personal caretaker. An elderly man in a plain black coat rose from the back row. Marlowe had been quiet the whole time. His hair was white. His posture was straight. His grief looked old and disciplined. I accept, Marlowe said. The egg made a hopeful sound. Marlowe bowed to the court. My late lord asked me to keep his son alive if wisdom failed. He was specific about the if. Mira choked. Avalini continued. Marlowe may feed, guard, and maintain the egg. He may not move it, petition privately, contact outside houses, or accept uninspected visitors. All care records will be reviewed weekly by my office. Selwyn shouted. Your office? Orin looked pleased for the first time. That brings us to the second judgment. The court shifted. Juniper read the recommendation. Since Selwyn could no longer hold the Frost seat, and since Avalini's blood had sustained the Southern Vault for 10 years, the court recognized her as acting Frost Warden with authority over blood contracts, vault audits, nursery care, and dragon supply law. Selwyn's egg vibrated. No, Mira waved at it. Try rocking harder. Perhaps the law will be moved by shell noise. Orin struck the staff. Lady Avalini Frost replaces Lord Selwyn Vale as Frost Warden until the Crown confirms permanent succession. The hall bowed. Not to her bloodline. To her work. Avalini accepted the staff of office with both hands. It was heavier than she expected. Tavik watched her with that impossible direct gaze. Pride warmed his face before he could hide it. When she looked back, he turned toward a window. Avalini almost laughed. After the hearing, the real work began. That was the part stories often skipped. Avalini did not. She dismissed 3 priests who had signed supply forms without reading them. She replaced Arden with a border captain who had never once described a woman as useful. She appointed Juniper Quill as chief auditor because any court that survived Juniper would become honest from fear alone. She hired Mrs. Brindle to run the nursery kitchen after the woman declared that all dragon eggs, guilty or innocent, needed regular heat and no nonsense. Mira became envoy for social houses because she could smile a duke into agreement and then repeat the agreement loudly enough for witnesses. Marlowe moved into the lower nursery with Selwyn's egg. The supervision system became the first public proof that Avalini's rule would not be sentimental. Nell inspected the nursery logs every Monday. Juniper inspected Nell because Juniper believed unchecked honesty could still become untidy. Mrs. Brindle inspected everyone whenever she brought soup. Marlowe endured all 3 with the expression of a man who had served dragons long enough to know that paperwork was safer than fire. Selwyn objected to the rotation immediately. I am an egg, not a prisoner, he declared on the first inspection morning. Juniper dipped her pen. You are an egg under restricted custodial care due to fraud, attempted renewed blood claim, and poor conversational hygiene. Conversational hygiene? You made several statements in public that contaminated the air. Marlowe adjusted the wool around the cradle. A fair diagnosis, my lord. You are supposed to be on my side. I am on your father's side. He wanted you alive. He did not say comfortable. The egg rocked hard enough to wrinkle the blanket. Avelini stood by the nursery door listening. She had not meant to smile. The smile arrived anyway. Tavik stood behind her, close enough that his warmth touched her shoulder through the air. You chose the correct caretaker. I chose the only person who loved his father more than Selwyn's excuses. And the correct inspectors. I chose women who make fraud tired. His gaze moved to her face. You are good at this. Punishing eggs? Building systems that survive men. Avelini turned her head. The directness was there again. No decoration. No performance. The kind of statement that made her ribs feel too narrow. You should stop saying things like that in hallways, she said. Where should I say them? The answer came too quickly in her mind and heated her face. Tavik saw it. His eyes sharpened, then moved away at once. I meant council rooms, she said. Of course. You did not think of council rooms. No, from inside the nursery, Selwyn shouted. I can hear romantic tension, and I object. Juniper's pen scratched. Additional complaint entered. Mira, who had appeared with a tray of buns, leaned into the hall. Does the egg get a vote on romance? No, Avelini and Tavik said together. Mira beamed. Progress. Cricket, in small residual form, stole a bun from the tray and fled under Marlowe's chair. Marlowe did not look down. He simply lifted one foot so the drake could pass. Avelini watched the absurd little scene and felt a quiet certainty settle inside her. This was not soft revenge. It was better. The old harm had been converted into rules, wages, witnesses, doors with locks, and people who could laugh without pretending nothing had happened. Avelini visited on the third day. The nursery was bright, warm, and guarded by two of her own stewards. Every visitor log sat on a stand by the door. Marlowe had placed the egg in a cradle lined with white wool. Selwyn was sulking. Avelini could tell because the shell faced the wall. Marlowe bowed. My lady. How is he? Loud before breakfast. Regretful after lunch. Philosophical at sunset. Insufferable throughout. The egg said, I can hear you. Marlowe nodded. That is why I said it clearly. Avelini stepped closer. The egg did not turn. Selwyn's voice came smaller than before. Will you ever supply me again? No, a pause. What if I change? You may change for yourself. That is cold. Avelini looked at the shell that had consumed 10 years of her warmth. Yes, she said. I learned from Winter. Marlowe lowered his eyes, and Avelini saw the old steward's mouth tighten against something like approval. On her way out, Selwyn called after her. Avelini. She stopped. I did know, he said. The admission came too late to help him. It still mattered that it came. I know, she answered. She left him with Marlowe, 2 guards, 3 ledgers, and 100 years to become less ornamental. That evening, Tavik found Avelini on the upper terrace. The frost court stretched below, no longer a place that had consumed her unseen. Her staff of office leaned against the stone beside her. Cricket slept at her feet, this time genuinely. Myra's laughter drifted from the hall, where she was explaining to a countess that apology flowers were acceptable only if accompanied by policy reform. Tavik stopped beside Avelini. You replaced him, he said. I replaced his function. That is better. I thought you would say something noble about not letting power harden me. He looked down at her. Power did not harm you. Power finally caught up. Her throat tightened. He was too direct. That was the trouble. Avelini had learned to read between words because most people hid knives there. Tavik kept handing her the blade hilt first and waiting for her to decide where it belonged. She touched the terrace rail. You still owe me an explanation. Yes. Cricket knows you. Yes. You are an ice dragon. Yes. You are also terrible at pretending to be only a road caretaker. Yes. She turned. That was the worst confession I have ever dragged out of a man. His mouth curved. I can improve. Start now. Tavik looked at the mountains. I was the Northern Frost King before Selwyn's family took the southern seat. My core was sealed in the failed drake to keep me hidden. Cricket is not separate from me. Avelini went still. At her feet, Cricket opened one eye, then shut it with the air of a creature avoiding consequences. You are Cricket, she said. Tavik looked deeply pained. I was hoping to avoid that exact sentence. Avelini stared at him. The huge man who guarded doors, split wood, carried her through the sky, and looked away when she blushed had also been the small drake who stole pastries, bit chair legs, played dead, and slept on her frozen boots. Her face heated. Tavik noticed and immediately looked at the horizon. You let me call you Cricket. I was sealed and wing-bent. I had limited political options. You ate pastry from the floor. Survival. You played dead when criticized. A tactical pause. You sat on my feet. He said nothing. Avellini stepped closer. Was that also tactical? His jaw tightened. No, the honesty went through her slowly. You knew who I was? She asked. I knew your blood kept Selwyn alive. I knew you fed me broth when the hatchery marked me useless. I knew you apologized to the broken wing before you touched it. I knew you were tired and still warmed everyone else. Avellini's anger had many old homes. This did not fit in any of them. Why not tell me? Because you had just escaped one dragon who turned your care into a claim. I would not become the second. Wind moved between them. Below, the court bells rang the evening hour. Avellini looked at the man before her. Tall, loyal, impossible, deeply ridiculous as a drake. The dragon who offered speed and called it efficiency. The man who stared like devotion had forgotten etiquette. You carried me as a dragon, she said. Yes. I thought of that as transportation. His ears turned red. I know. You did not. I hoped. Avellini covered her mouth. He looked at her. Are you laughing? Yes. At me? Entirely. His shoulders relaxed by one small degree. Good. Good. You laugh differently now. The laughter faded into something softer. Tavik held out his hand, palm up. No demand. No old law. No bond spoken like a trap. Avellini looked at it for a long moment. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed carefully around hers, as if strength were not permission. I am not ready to belong to anyone, she said. I know. I may never like being claimed. I am not asking. What are you asking? His eyes met hers with no defense at all. To stand where you can see me. Avellini's heart moved. Not surrender. Not fate. A choice learning its own shape. She stepped closer and kissed him. Tavik froze for half a heartbeat. Then his free hand rose to her waist, stopped, and waited. Avellini smiled against his mouth. You may. His hand settled at her waist. The kiss deepened, careful until it was not. He bent to her like a man who had waded through snow and silence, and still did not believe the door had opened. Avellini rose into him because she wanted to, because her body was hers again, because the warmth between them asked and did not take. Tavik's hand tightened at her waist only after she leaned closer. The restraint in him frayed, then held. That made the kiss more dangerous, not less. Avellini felt him ask without words. She answered by sliding one hand to the back of his neck and pulling him down the last inch. For once, no one interrupted. The court below could burn soup, misfile law, or argue with an egg. Avellini did not care. Tavik made a low sound against her mouth, then stopped as if he had betrayed himself. She smiled. That sounded inefficient. His eyes opened, silver and very close. It was. Good. He kissed her again. Only after that second kiss had properly ruined both their dignity did a sharp chirp come from the stone floor. They broke apart slowly, which was an improvement. Cricket sat between them. Avellini stared. You are also Cricket. Tavik looked down at his small drake shape, which should not have existed separately while he was human. The drake burped blue smoke. Tavik closed his eyes. Residual shedding. Avellini began to laugh again. Mira appeared at the terrace door. Did the pet split off from the man? Excellent. We can keep the cute one during arguments. Tavik looked at her. Mira pointed at him. Do not stare at me with king eyes. I helped carry your dramatic little body in a blanket. The small cricket trotted to Avellini and sat on her boot. Avellini looked at Tavik. He chooses me. So do I, Tavik said. That stopped the laughter. It did not stop the joy. Months later, the Frost seat ran better than it had in 50 years. Juniper's audits made corruption expensive. Mrs. Brindle's nursery records made even guilty eggs gain weight appropriately. Marlowe sent weekly reports about Selwyn's behavior, including one memorable note that read, His Lordship attempted sarcasm before breakfast. Consequence, no velvet cushion until noon. Mira became beloved and feared across the court because she could flirt, smile, and then ask where the missing funds had gone. Avellini restored the blood contract system with one principle written above the vault doors. No life given in silence becomes another person's property. Selwyn's egg remained under guard. Sometimes he shouted. Sometimes he negotiated. Once he demanded a mirror. Marlowe denied it on grounds of public safety. Avellini did not hate him every day. That was its own freedom. Some days he was only an egg under supervision, a consequence with a voice. Tavik took her to the northern roads whenever she needed speed. He always claimed it saved time. Avellini always agreed with the politeness of a woman who knew exactly what he was doing. On one clear winter morning, she climbed onto his dragon back before he lowered his wing completely. Impatient, he rumbled. For efficiency, she said. His neck warmed under her hands. If dragons could blush, she added, leaning closer, you would be cooked through. The great ice dragon stood motionless in the snow. From the courtyard, Mira shouted, he is blushing. I can see it from here. The small residual cricket, sitting on Mrs. Brindle's bread cart, chirped in agreement. Tavik launched into the sky with such force that everyone below cheered. Avellini held on and laughed into the wind. Below her lay the court that had once called her quiet. Ahead waited roads she now chose for herself. Under her hands flew a dragon, who had never once asked her to bleed to prove love. He only carried her higher, then waited for her to decide where they would land. Subscribe for more rejected mates, dragon bonds, clever heroines, loyal beasts, public reckonings, and slow-burn kings who think saving time is a believable excuse for wanting to stay close.